Hello, this is Neurodiversity in Action, Practical Tools for Principals, building a whole school approach to inclusion, regulation and well-being. My name is Sorcha Rice, I'm a senior occupational therapist, and this talk is presented by Neurodiversity Ireland. So about me, my name is Sorcha, I'm autistic with a PDA profile, and I'm a senior occupational therapist. I share my lived experience on Instagram. I'm passionate about highlighting practical supports for neurodivergent individuals in school. So, our agenda for today will be I will introduce Neurodiversity Ireland, I will give you the purpose and the learning outcomes of today's talk, I'll provide the role of the principal, barriers to inclusion, and actionable strategies. So, our learning outcomes for today. By the end of this session, principals will understand that regulation is central to learning, not a bonus. We will learn concrete school-wide strategies that support staff and students. We will see how principal leadership drives cultural change. And we will talk about practical next steps and resources to begin implementing change immediately. So, the role of the principal. So, the principal sets the tone for the whole school. Your leadership can model regulation, supportive practices, empower staff to use sensory approaches without stigma. We can advocate for rights based, inclusive policies, and you can protect staff well being by reducing systemic stress. So in 2016, the United Nations released a statement that said the right to inclusive education encompasses a transformation in culture, policy, and practice in all education environments to accommodate the differing requirements and identities of individual students, together with a commitment to remove the barriers that impede that possibility. So currently in schools, we are seeing that ethos are moving towards being more inclusive, but they still, according to As I Am, in a 2024 study, found that 0 out of 40 codes of behavior are fully rights compliant. But we are seeing a shift towards more inclusive ethos. Our physical environments in school are not meeting the sensory needs of children. There's a huge rate of teacher burnout. According to a DCU study in 2025, 86% of teachers report feeling moderate to high burnout. And at the moment, in schools, we're not meeting individual students' needs, which is leading to a huge rise in school avoidance, which is linked to dysregulation. So throughout this talk, I'm going to be using this DCU framework that came out in 2025. It is called A Framework for Autism-Friendly Schools Informed by Autistic Students. You can find this for free online. It was developed from a 2-year research study from 2023 to 2025 with autistic children, parents, and school staff across Ireland. It captures the often missing voices of autistic students about their experience of inclusion. I think this framework, if you read the document, is really nicely laid out. It sets out 10 practical principles that schools can adopt at minimal cost. The purpose is to help schools embed autism-friendly culture that improves participation and belonging for everyone. So we'll start with inclusive ethos. So, inclusive ethos and using a strengths-based approach is really important. So, the principle that I'll be referring to is school management should visibly articulate a neurodivergent inclusive ethos. Schools should adopt a strengths-based approach to neurodivergence. So this is really important. So how you can action this is ensure that all school newsletters, school reports, any communication about a student, any of your websites use neurodivergent affirming language. So You can use the Neurodiversity Ireland language guide to help you. So, one of the examples is we're moving away from labeling challenging behavior and talking about distress or regulation needs. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of NeuroWild. Her logo is on the right side of the screen. She has so many nice cartoons, and they're simple and easy to read, and they're great for showing students and printing them out and having them all around your school. It's just a really nice, fun way to learn about neuro-affirming language and help you guide how to approach spreading neurodiversity affirming information. So, to continue on about inclusive ethos, what we need to do is see all behavior as communication. So, the NCSE released the Relate framework this year. It's a regulation first approach to reframing behavior and supporting student engagement and participation. It's really a great guide to help you figure out how to move your behavior codes to looking at more regulation first rather than looking at the behavior. It focuses on emotional safety and connection before teaching and learning, and it's really great. So you can get this for free as well. You can also contact NCSE and have your school go through Relate training. So why are we moving away from looking at behavior first and now we're looking at regulation first? So I created this image so you can see the child standing here. And so if we're just looking at behavior, oftentimes we're looking at how can we motivate them or decrease that behavior. So we're looking at reward systems, we're looking at kind of punishments, like standing on the wall and yard time. So we're just looking at the behavior and start trying to stop or motivate that behavior. But now we're looking at what's beyond that behavior, and behind the wall is the pyramid of learning. So what we're looking for is what's actually preventing them from doing what they want to do, and that is often our regulation, our nervous system. So this is the pyramid of learning, and at the bottom or the foundation of learning is our central nervous system. So once our regulation needs are met, then we will have access to motor planning, body awareness, being able to understand and respond to language. We're going to be looking at activities of daily living. And at the very top is learning. So when we're dysregulated at the bottom, it is so much harder to access to anything above. So say if you were stressed on the way to work, you were dysregulated, say you have your own kids and they're running late and you're trying to get them organized, and you grab your cup of coffee to drink it in the car. If you're dysregulated, you're more likely to knock your coffee over or trip or forget something. And then you get into the car and say there's more traffic because you're a bit later than usual. You're going to be very dysregulated by the time you get to work, and you'll need to have a nice relaxing cup of coffee before you can start your day. But if you don't and you just rush from class to class to class, you're going to be very dysregulated at the end of the day. So this shows no matter what reward systems you had when you got to work or consequences for being late, none of that would have really helped you. And what truly would have helped was regulating your nervous system. So that is why we're moving away from reward systems. So I know a lot of schools use dojo points and reward systems, because we often hear that this is how you motivate and support children. We hear it in every aspect of parenting and supporting children. It's all about reward systems, but these are used and designed to create compliance, and they're not looking at the nervous system and regulation. So what we really need to do is we need to understand the child's specific needs and how to support them, and then we can support them to engage in education and things that they want to do. Oftentimes, when we're using reward systems, we will miss underlying difficulty. So, this could be executive functioning differences. So, they may have difficulty planning or initiating. So, that means starting a task or sequencing, so knowing which order to do things in. They might have motor skill needs. So, it could be fine or gross motor difficulties, or they could have sensory regulation differences. So, when we're moving towards a neuroaffirmative approach, we're removing shame and we're supporting those underlying needs rather than thinking about behavior. So now we're
Hi
going to
everyone, my
move
name is
on
Siobhan.
our
I'm
neurodivergent
a
mainstream
mainstream primary
teacher
school
about
teacher,
how she creates an
and I
inclusive
wanted to share a little bit
space.
about my own journey to creating environments of regulation first. And it all started when I learnt myself that I was autistic and ADHD, and I started to explore my own sense of regulation, and really realised that there was a huge shift from external understandings to internal understandings. And that really made me reflect on my own classroom, where I suppose I had been taught that um, being still and being quiet and everyone looking in one direction meant that children were ready to learn. Where in fact, I suppose that's not the case. We know that now. We know about the internal nervous system, and that regulation comes from that felt safety, that internal felt safety. I am safe. I'm safe here. I'm safe to be me. And that comes from our needs being met. And when those needs are met, and when that nervous system is in a lovely sense of not being overwhelmed or underwhelmed, I suppose being whelmed or window of tolerance, well, that's actually where that whole learning growth happens. Um, and it takes an enormous pressure off the teacher, because if we look at the left hand side of the screen here, we see that teacher in control of 30 nervous systems it's a massive responsibility, and it's extremely overwhelming. And so creating this sense of reward charts and eliminating distractions and basically trying to control how children are. It's very, very overwhelming for the teacher. It is very, very overwhelming for the children. They don't feel in control. I suppose the teacher can't be in control. And so that move, crossing over the fear zone, because I was terrified. I was terrified of this whole sense of regulation in the classroom and handing the control, power, empowerment back to the children for their own nervous systems and the journey to enable that. And so if we look at when all regulation flows through one teacher, everyone feels the strain. And yet on the right hand side, universal design and the relate program shares that agency, so whole class stays regulated, including the teacher, because it is really about everybody within the classroom being in that window of tolerance where true learning can really happen. So what are the needs of the nervous system, and how can we help create environments where that happens? So let's have a look. So, things that I have done, and there's no one way of doing this within a classroom, but lots and lots of trial and error, and fear, scary letting go. But I started with the physiological needs. So allowing them to go to the toilet when they want, to eat when they want, drink when they want, myself included. Sensory emotional, which includes all 8 of our senses, so reducing noise, um, ear defenders, noise cancelling in ear, all sorts of sensory tools that are available to them at all times. And I think this is key, is that it's always available to them. That we introduced monotropic autodidactic learning, so lots of project work, but children focusing on their deep interest, passionate interest, and learning through that. Quiet spaces and escape routes, and that again available at all times. So the children decide, I need a little break here, I need a little bit of a time out, I'm getting a little bit overwhelmed. Communication, that we accept all forms of communication within the classroom. Connection, enormous. That beautiful sense of connection and being there and open communication. Unconditional positive regard, where we accept children for who they are, regardless. attunement where, as the teacher or the adults in the room, that we can help children understand what is happening to them, notice little changes in them, to allow them to start in their journey of recognizing what's happening inside their own body, and in turn getting those needs met through the environment. Identity, belonging, where they feel that the classroom is theirs and they have a voice and they can say no, they can opt in and opt out. Movement is enormous. Plenty and plenty of movement spaces, spinning chairs, mats, flexible seating, yoga balls, wobble stools, fidgets, doodling, movement to allow go to a quiet place when everything's getting just too much for them. And I use these strategies myself. I use the fidgets, I use the doodling, I use the eating, I use the wobble stools, and we just have that sense of community, and that regulating is something that we work on together, and that is just central to our whole culture within our classroom, because it's then that sense of true engagement can really happen. So best of luck, small steps, it doesn't happen overnight, and lots of trial and error, and include the children in your decisions because they are amazing. Hi everyone, my name is
Yeah,
Siobhan. I'm
that makes me
a
emotional. It's
mainstream
such a
primary school
good
teacher,
video, and thank you so
and
much to
I wanted to share a
Siobhan
little bit about
for
my own
providing
journey.
your input. If you want to hear more from Siobhan, if you use your phone to scan the QR code, this leads to her Instagram. So she shares more of her experience as a neurodivergent teacher on Instagram, and you can contact her for trainings, etc. So now we're moving on to minimizing barriers for individual students. So, how can we do this? So, going back to that DCU study, another principle was school management should actively work to minimize barriers to full participation of neurodivergent students in their school. So, how do we do this? So, I would ask all students to submit an About Me at the start of the year, including what might make participation hard, what supports they would like, and their strengths. And so this will be a great way for teachers to get to know their students, and be able to support them straight away. I'd also recommend meeting with family and designated staff at the start of the year and at the end of the year to plan reasonable accommodations. So I think the transition from one teacher to the next can be overwhelming and hard for both teachers, SNAs, and students and families. So we think the more communication and the more we work together, the better. So I would do this at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year. If you're not sure what to ask students to include in their About Me, in the NCSE Relate, there is a Getting to Know Me document, or you can create your own one, but this might help you guide what to ask students and parents to include. And then another principle was school management should facilitate timely communication and meetings with neurodivergent students and their parents to discuss urgent issues. So I would agree communication channels at the start of the year, and have an urgent contact protocol for parents, and see, do they prefer phone calls, emails, or however you use to communicate with your parents. There is the Total Communication Diary, which is on the screen, is a lovely communication diary that you can use as a school. It was created by an SNA and parent of a neurodivergent child. I think it's really great because it asks parents to write about sleep, and then teachers can say about toileting, feeding, regulation opportunities during the day, because it's really important that we're not looking at snapshot sensory regulation in the day. So just because a child might look like they're regulated in the classroom, this doesn't help us know their overall nervous system. What we need to know is, how is their sleep impacted? How is their toileting impacted? How is their feeding and self-care? So if they're not sleeping at nighttime, which often happens around the October midterm, if they're not eating in school, or they're not eating as much at home, if they're not toileting, so if they're becoming more constipated, or if they're going to the toilet more frequently, this all shows us that something is happening to their nervous system, and most likely they need more regulation opportunities. So this is a great way to make sure that you're communicating that and having a record of this. So now we're going to the physical environment, creating safety, security, and regulation. So the next principle is, school management should ensure the physical school environment feels safe, secure, and regulating for neurodivergent students, but should be for all students. So how can we do this? This can be a little bit overwhelming, because if you think about adapting the school environment, oftentimes that can lead you to sensory companies, which are very expensive. But make adapting your school environment doesn't have to be expensive. What I would do is review all the classrooms, walk through with a sensory lens. So think about the noise, think about the lights, think about the textures, and make an audit of that. I would try to create quiet spaces and regulation in every classroom, which I'll go into detail in the next few slides. As a whole school, you can allow sensory-friendly uniform adjustments. So I know a lot of children who might not like the feeling of the school uniform, so they get sensory-friendly clothes in the same color. So you can look at making adjustments like that. And then I would see if there is any space in your school to set aside one area for regulation, if possible. But I think a lot of schools don't have the space. It can be hard, because if you have a separate space for regulation, that means that you have to have an S&A available to take the student out of the classroom. These things aren't always realistic, and it can be very difficult to accommodate. So what we really want to do is create regulation opportunities inside every single classroom throughout the day, so we don't have to rely so much on movement breaks or outdoor spaces. And so to help do that, the NCSE have the physical classroom environment document that you can read. I think it's a really nice document. It really highlights how they incorporated the student voice in creating regulation into the classroom. It talks about universal design, so it gives you how you can set up the classroom into zones. So you could have like, I'll show you in the next few slides, but there'll be like floor sitting options, a regulation space, a safe space, how you can set up your tables. So I think this kind of really helps guide how you can adapt each single classroom. So one of the best ways to do that is to have flexible seating. So you can have a space, so you can see in the middle image, this is like a floor sitting area. So you can get those like lap desks. That's a little green thing in the image. You can have bean bags or pillows on the ground. And so this is great, because when you're sitting on the ground, you're getting full body deep pressure. So that is more regulating than sitting up on a chair. You can also, on the left, you can see they have standing desks, and they're standing on wobble boards, which is very cool. You can actually just get little like risers and attach them to the bottom of your desks to make them taller for standing desks. You can use peanut balls. In the image on the right, children are sitting on peanut balls or yoga balls to focus on reading or doing any learning activities. So this is a way that you can incorporate regulation all day, every day in your classrooms, is by looking at alternative seating. Of course, we can look at like move and sit cushions, TheraBand on the end of the chairs. All of these things also are very regulating. And then in our classroom, I would highly recommend having a designated visual safe space. So, this is a space where a child, if they know they're becoming dysregulated or overwhelmed, they know they can go move into this safe space with autonomy. This is honoring their own autonomy and giving them the ability to work on their own interoception, which is being able to tell how your body feels in the moment and support self-regulation. So on the left, the blue chair with the hood, that's from IKEA. That can be really great because it also spins slowly, so that gives you vestibular input. You can even see this child is also on a wobble cushion, which is giving you proprioceptive input. So this is a very regulating setup. You can also get the IKEA chairs on Facebook Marketplace. But yeah, so that's a really nice, small, safe space that children can use. You can also, I know a lot of schools are getting tents. Sensory blackout tents can be expensive. They don't have to be blackout tents. A tent is just like a nice safe space that they can go into. IKEA have ones for like €10. Smiths are coming out with a sensory line, so you can check there. You can see in the middle image, they just used like a sheet to have a designated safe space. And then also we're looking at reducing lighting and sound. So a lot of the times neurodivergent children can find unpredictable noise very dysregulating. So when you're transitioning into school and everyone's talking, that's very unpredictable. Whereas if there's like music or they're creating their own noise, that's predictable and safe. So what we want to do in the classroom is reduce the unpredictable noise. So how you can do that is you can add these tennis balls to the end of chairs. As an OT, I was doing a school visit in a school in Dublin, and they had the tennis balls on the end of every chair, and it genuinely made such a difference in the classroom. It was so nice. And they also had reduced lighting, and I just found the space so calming and regulating. So yeah, it's really important to try to reduce the noise and the lights where you can. Talking about all these sensory accommodations, it can be hard because you might be like, we don't have the budget to do these things. The In your county, I would check with your library. I know Kildare, Wicklow, and Dublin have these sensory catalogues where parents and teachers can borrow sensory equipment for free. So you can borrow the equipment, try it out in the classes, see what children like, what they don't like, and then that might help you create like a budget or like a wish list. Because what's hard about sensory regulation and also wonderful is everyone is unique. So I could say, oh yes, get like 100 peanut balls, but then some kids might not like a peanut ball, and then that's really difficult. So I'd say that it's better to have a selection of sensory equipment in the environment so children can follow their own lead and try them out. And it's even better if you can borrow it for free first and trial it out. So then we also want to have a space in the classroom for regulation. So I think a lot of the times people might know to get a tent, but they might not know what to put into it. Or they might be like, oh, I want to create a regulation space. But if you look at all the options online, it is very overwhelming. So I have lots of examples on my Instagram, but I always look for proprioceptive input, which is anything you're using your muscles for, vestibular input, so that's either like rocking or spinning, and cause and effect. So cause and effect is something that creates lots of safety and predictability. So when I do something, something predictable happens. So bubbles is a way that loads of children find cause and effect really regulating. So when you blow bubbles and then you pop them, that's cause and effect. In the middle is like a switchboard, and it has lights. So when you flip the switch, a light comes on, and that's cause and effect. So having something like this in your classroom in the tent can be really regulating in the safe space. The sequined pop-up thing on the right side of the PowerPoint, that's cause and effect as well, because when you push the sequins one way, they're silver, and you push them the other way, they're rainbow. So that is cause and effect. And then there's like a target board in the middle of the screen. So when you rip that off, that's Velcro. So that's using your muscles, and then you're hitting it. That's cause and effect. So that's what you kind of want to design in your classroom, is cause and effect. Deep pressure. So I've received so many messages from teachers on Instagram who have gotten trampolines in their classroom, which is so amazing. I think a lot of them said they were very nervous about getting a trampoline in the classroom because it does sound a bit extreme. And you could be worried that like every student is going to be on it all the time. I think when there's something new in a classroom, they might use it a lot in the beginning. But the kids that don't need it won't use it, and the kids that really do need it will use it. And it is very regulating. And I've just received so many messages of so many teachers who are so amazed at the benefit of just adding a trampoline into the classroom. And then the peanut ball is the blue thing on the right. This can be great because you can sit at your desk and still get the deep pressure of bouncing on it while you're drawing or sitting and doing tabletop activities. And you could also roll on it, so that's giving you the vestibular input. On the left side is the Autism Level Up framework. Neurodiversity Ireland and I will be doing a webinar very soon on how to implement the Autism Level Up framework. You can get it for free online, but it's all about your energy levels. So I can explain that in future talks. So now we're going to hear from Jane, who is an autism class teacher, on how she incorporates regulation into her
Hi
classroom.
everyone, my name is Jane and I'm an autism class teacher based in Wicklow. We set up our autism class in September 2024. We decided to incorporate a very much regulation first approach in here. And subsequently, when the Relate document from the NCSE came out, we were absolutely delighted because this really tallies with the method we had employed from the get-go. So what does this look like in our classroom? We don't follow a work system. We follow a child-led play-based approach in our autism classroom. So we have lots and lots of sensory equipment out and available all the time. We're very, very lucky we have an open door sensory room in our classroom, which was built for us, we're very, very fortunate. But there's no timetable for this. The children come in and out as they need. Initially we thought, wow, how are we going to manage all that? But because it's always available, there's no major panic about it. The children come in, they go out, they share the space. There's really no issue. We have no zones in our classroom. We don't close off any areas at any time of the day, like playtime or work time, or we don't employ that kind of an environment. We really do enjoy a play-based environment. The children regulate all day long. They use the equipment. What kind of equipment do we use? We have a swing. We're lucky, we have a bubble tube, we have a really beautiful padded area where they can really sensory regulate the proprioceptive sense. We also have peanut balls, we have tents, we have lighting, the children can really, it's like a menu, they can really just access whatever kind of sensory regulation supports they need at any given time. And this has worked really, really well for us. We find that the children are so used to having these supports, and they really depend on them. You couldn't just remove something. they really do depend on these things being there. Also, things like sand and water are incredibly regulating for the children in our class, as for all children, really. And also access to outdoor play, the fresh air, the nature, sliding down the slide, playing in the sandpit, these kind of things are really, really regulatory for children. And we really believe that every classroom should provide access to this kind of sensory regulation material, if possible, at all time. We've had really, really great progress being made here. Children learning through their senses as well has been really amazing. The lack of workstation environment has really benefited the children, I feel. We strew their work around the room rather than having set times for set things to happen. This has worked out really, really well, especially for anyone with the demand avoidant profile. And we're really, really happy with how it's going. So we really highly recommend setting up your autism classroom for regulation first. Absolutely. And that really helps to help develop the relationship between the staff and the children. When the children are regulated, when you're co-regulating together as well, it really does form a bond quicker. Everything stems from that, we believe. Best of luck kitting out and setting up your autism class. And it's really healthy to reflect, take out the relate document, look at how maybe you could do things slightly differently in order to make sure that regulation is always available to the children in your class. Hi everyone, my name is
Thank you,
Jane and I'm an
Jane. So Jane is the neuroaffirmative_teacher on Instagram. She also shares lots of her own experiences and how she implements neuroaffirmative practices in an education setting. So if you'd like to follow her on Instagram, if you just use your phone again, it'll lead you to her Instagram profile. So now we're going to talk about teacher burnout. So, a DCU study in 2025 found that 86% of Irish teachers report moderate to high burnout, with 42% of teachers considering leaving the profession. This is a shockingly high number. And it is so important that we are supporting teachers in regulating their own nervous system. When a teacher or an SNA or a staff member is dysregulated, that is also going to dysregulate students. So staff well-being is a whole school issue that we need to focus on. So what can principals do? So you can add regulation to staff meetings. So a lot of the time, staff meetings will have tea, biscuits, fruit out on the table. You could have fidgets as well. Have the option to get up and walk around, make sure that you're doing movement breaks throughout the staff meetings. I would recommend providing a quiet space for staff. So I know lunch times can oftentimes be overwhelming because you can be crowded into the same room. There's lots of different conversations going on. So maybe just having an office or a designated space that teachers who would like kind of some downtime can go to during these times. I would also, as a whole, all staff get together and you can talk about if there's different duties like yard time and stuff that some staff might find overwhelming, and have an open discussion about how we can accommodate everyone. And then I would have normalized disclosure for everyone so that everyone feels open to talking about how they feel. And I would model regulation as a principal yourself. So it's really important that we're supporting teacher regulation because this is essential for their well-being and everyone's well-being in school. So how we're going to support regulation for staff. So I would recommend figuring out how you can build regulation into the school day for everyone. So I'm part of the school therapy pilot program. So I see lots of teachers and classes going on a full all everyone gets together and goes on a walk during the day, which I think is very regulating. Maybe before school, you could have an optional yoga or staff walk or a nice coffee break together before you start your school day. At lunchtime, you could have the option of going for a walk or, going to that safe space to just regulate. I think crises are happening in school, so children's regulation needs aren't being met, and this is leading to crisis. And then we are seeing a lot of injury to staff, which can be really difficult. So in those moments, we also need to be supporting staff to regulate their nervous system. So this is really important when you create a crisis plan, to not only look at supporting the students' regulation, but also the staff. So is there a way that maybe you could step in and give that teacher or SNA a few minutes to go get a cup of tea and a biscuit or whatever they like to do to regulate their nervous system? And then you could also have like a well-being check-in board at the staff entrance or at the end of the day. Outside of the school day, you can do staff-led groups for activities. So you can have step challenges, sea swims if you live near the sea. You can go on hikes, gardening, knitting, art. So I think the more we talk about the things that we enjoy, all these things are very regulating for our nervous system. When we become stressed and dysregulated and burnt out in work, we don't have the energy to do these things that we enjoy outside of work. But the more we try to slowly keep those things going, the more regulating it will be. So the more we talk about it and model it for everyone, the more likely people will continue to do these things. To reduce the pressure, you could have like an optional WhatsApp group to share regulation wins, or figure out whatever way your school and staff would like to communicate this. But yeah, I think a lot of the times we forget that we need to regulate our own nervous systems, and that is really important. So now that we've talked about teacher burnout, we are now seeing a lot of student burnout as well. So when school burnout happens, it means that a student's window of capacity or tolerance is closed, their nervous system is overwhelmed, and they can no longer cope with the demands or pressure of the school day. At this point, learning and engagement aren't possible. So no matter how many rewards or how much motivation we try to get the student into school and to learn, their brain and their body will not let them because they're in survival mode. So what do we need to do? So to support a student in burnout, we really need to think about creating safe, predictable environments where the students feel secure and understood. So their sensory regulation needs are consistently met. This book by Eliza Fricker, Can't Not Won't, is a really great book to kind of understand why a child can't go to school. I think the lived experience is so important to understand. So we need to look beyond survival behaviors. So that fight, flight, freeze behaviors, those are protective. And we can see those responses as communication. So when a child is constantly in fight, flight, or freeze, they are trying to protect themselves. And we need to look at why that's happening and how we can support that why. And oftentimes it's because of dysregulation. So what can we do? We can focus on meeting the regulation needs. So we can create the safe spaces in school. We can, this is the classroom sensory screening tool from NCSE. If you Google that, it'll come up. It'll kind of help you guide going through your school environment and identifying the sensory aspects, so like the smells, the lighting, the noise, and how you can reduce that. We can create predictability by having consistent routines. A lot of the times when we hear predictability, we might think of first then or visual schedules, but sometimes that can add pressure and demand and close someone's nervous system window even more. To create predictability and safety, it's better if we have consistent routines. So we might greet them the same way. You might start your school day the same way. You might use the same tone. The same adults might always be there to check in. These will all support a student who's feeling very unsafe in school. We can also talk to the parent and ask, what does regulation look like at home and how can we support that in school? So if they're always on their peanut ball at home, or if they're always using screens at home to regulate their nervous system, how can we implement that in school? Screens are cause and effect. They're very predictable. They know exactly what's going to happen and they have complete autonomy over it. So how can we create that in school? We can have those safe spaces, we can have the cause and effect in those safe spaces, and we can meet the regulation needs. This is all providing the same input. The more a child seeks screens, the more we know they're seeking that safety and predictability, and we need to meet the regulation needs. And then we want to model it as staff. So we heard from Siobhan and Jane about how they model these strategies in the classroom. They use the fidgets themselves, they're on the peanut ball themselves. So we're showing that everyone regulates their nervous system and that we can all do it together. So the key message is, by creating a neuroaffirmative school ethos and embedding regulation supports for both staff and students, we can break the burnout cycle for students and teachers alike. Regulation needs come before learning. We need to adapt the environment, not the child. Staff well-being is really important for student well-being, and the principal drives cultural change. So when we make small universal shifts, it leads to big long-term impact. And don't forget, you can borrow the sensory equipment for free from the library first. So the next steps for principals is to update behaviour codes, so moving more towards regulation first approaches. We need to audit the school environment using a sensory lens. We need to embed universal regulation strategies, and we need to partner with parents. So we need to know what helps at home, how is their sleep, how is their eating, how is their toileting, and how can we support them in school. So these are my references for the talk. So I hope you found this helpful. Again, my name is Sorcha Rice. I am autistic with a PDA profile and I'm a senior occupational therapist. I also have an Instagram where I share lots of practical advice and support for teachers and SNAs and parents. So if you scan that QR code, it should lead you to my Instagram. So, thank you so much on behalf of Neurodiversity Ireland for listening to this talk. I hope you found it helpful. You can also follow Neurodiversity Ireland on Instagram and you can look at their website for more information. Thank you.